big landscapes and wide open spaces with sprinklings of people is something I think I've come across in your work, with two projects in particular, America and Iceland. But what's the interest there in these big places?
These big places or the people?
Both?
I think potentially, the more work I create and the more I look back at the work, it seems that I tend to go for projects where the landscape has informed, the history of the landscape has informed the present day. So with America, I did this big project documenting the Oregon Trail in the modern day. And the Oregon Trail was this incredibly long route from Missouri to Oregon that the fur traders took in the 19th century to kind of find better life. And during the recession, I kind of wanted to photograph this financial route in the modern day as a kind of bringing history to the present. You know, you may not realize it, but it vibrates through us wherever we are. And with Iceland, it was all about this famous murder case that had happened in the Icelandic landscape. And it was revisiting these places, these key areas of interest and photographing around them. And so I think that maybe answers the landscape question. In regards to the portraits, I don't necessarily look at my portraits as factually relevant to the trail, but for me, they're kind of almost like placeholders, like they're like a cast in a theatre piece. They're the kind of people that you would associate that area with. So I think it adds a greater context to the landscape when you see the people which inhabit it.
I mean, how did you come across the story with Iceland? And because it's quite a popular destination, more so now. I've had a lot of contemporary photography. It's like, have you got it out of your system?
I'm 2 for 2. I've got America and Iceland. I think with Iceland, so I was shortlisted for this prize with Ideas Tap and Magnum, and
which you did very well in.
I ended up winning, very fortunately. But I was talking to a member of A Fine Beginning, who I do with, called Gwaine Barnard, about this. I wanted to explore the idea of storytelling within photography, something which I like to kind of almost bend narratives sometimes and kind of play with the idea of the viewer's original response to pictures as fact. And then Gwaine brought to my attention this crime case that had happened in the 1970s through this BBC production. And it had everything I wanted in a project. So very quickly, it's a very complex story, but very quickly, 2 people went missing in the 1970s, and the police had got no headway with it, and there was a lot of public pressure. So what ended up happening was they arrested 6 complete strangers, and over the course of 2 years, took them out into the landscape, made them recreate the murders every day, to the point that their memories were replaced. They suffered something called memory distress syndrome. And they all confessed to killing these 2 people, even though they had nothing to do with it. And so here was a story about storytelling in Iceland, which is, inherent to the landscape, and literal storytelling in people believing what they're being told. And I thought there was such a beautiful link between that and the photographic process that I just had to do a project on it.
Which area was this in Iceland?
Well, mainly in and around Reykjavik.
Right.
But my journey took me across the whole ring road. I almost wanted, talking again about landscape and portraits, the Icelandic landscape has been photographed, numerous times, but I kind of wanted it to be like the 7th person that was arrested, the 7th character, the 7th portrait, because it is, in its essence, a living thing. So I kind of wanted to photograph it around the whole islands of Iceland, but mainly it was around Reykjavik and Keflavik. So yeah.
Does that isolation element appeal to you? Being out there with your own camera and just approaching people off the cuff?
Yeah, I think so. In the States especially, I spent a long time sleeping in my car, driving up and down the Oregon Trail numerous times. And then you look at Iceland and you look at this almost inhospitable landscape. It doesn't make sense how people can function there. And when you visit, you just go, oh wow, this is incredible any time of year. It's just so kind of powerful, and nature kind of is all around you in this really horrific but beautiful, serene way. And so I guess the isolation of Iceland in itself that did interest me. I mean, I did have a film crew with me for the first 5 days, so I wasn't necessarily on my own.
Because there is an interesting short documentary, which we'll put the link to at the bottom of this post, with Vice, which is a very interesting short film in its own right, because there's some of the people, the characters you came across, and their take, particularly the guy who knew both sides of the story.
Sure, the conspiracy theorist. Yeah, the images at the end of that thing aren't from that project. They were taken for the documentary, but I'm continuing working on this story. I'm working with a writer and a designer currently. So I think maybe in the next year and a half, 2 years, it will finally be ready to be shared with the world. But I'd say it's probably the most ambitious and most complex story I've ever tried to photograph. And it was ultimately the thing that I ended up winning the Magnum thing with. So yeah, that's really exciting, but it's just, I need to make sure that my American work's out of the way. I need to do a spring clean, and then I can focus on that. So I'm hoping to go out in December to continue the work.
What, just sticking with Iceland a second, the mysterious part, the mythical part, like the Huldafolk part, which I think some people bring up, and Dan Wood did as well, because he was quite drawn to that, and claimed to have the experiences, I think, him and his brother. But is there one aspect of Iceland you would go back and maybe do differently, having observed it and been in it and spoken to the people? Or is it a continuation of that one project?
It's a continuation of that one. I mean, I shot a lot when I was out there. But the story is so much more complex. I was out there for a month when I did that, and I tend to do long form storytelling. So I need to spend at least a year and a half, 2 years on this one story, and to do it justice to, because the 6 people, a lot of them 4 of them are still alive.
Right.
And it's to do justice to their story as well. I don't want to just kind of go there, do a half-assed job, and then come back and then go, oh, there we go, and then move on to the next thing. This thing, this work in particular, I really think is going to, I wouldn't say make waves, but for me anyway, it's rare for me as I'm making a body of work to be excited about it. When I started America, by day 2, I couldn't wait for the whole project to be over, just because it's that laborious kind of, oh God, you're constantly thinking. But with this body of work, in particular the Iceland stuff, it's so complex that it's not just photography. I've got this archive, and we've got the written word, and we've got this amazing design ideas. And I'm working with an amazing writer called Sophia Catherine Smith, who kind of helped me with my original pitch. So she's really been with it since the start, and it's really interesting working with a writer, because obviously I see things in such a visual way. Well, I guess everybody does, but in terms of, I'm trying to tell a story through a visual way. To have just words is kind of mind-blowing for me, and I'm quite severely dyslexic, so it's originally was something quite daunting. And then working with a designer as well, it's kind of the glue that holds the two things together, how they work together. And so yeah, it's really excited by it. I want to be able to show you more, but I don't think I'll be ready to share it publicly. I want it to be finished when people first see it. But I think there's 5 pictures on my website, which were the ones from the Magnum thing. But the project's called Sugar Paper Theories, because the conspiracy theorist who you see in the documentary has dedicated his life to trying to crack this case. And one of the photos on the website, you see this yellow piece of sugar paper with all these lines and dates, and that's his sugar paper theory, and he has hundreds of them, all differently designed, and all they've got different colours, kind of like arts and crafts. So I've got quite a few of them now back in my flat. So the idea is that me, Sophia, and Emily, the designer, that's kind of our sugar paper theory of what happened. But it's an incredibly complex story, and so I don't think it would do anyone justice to show you'd just be confused seeing it now.
Yeah. But on sticking with collaboration in a second, are you enjoying that process?
I am. surprisingly.
Right. Are you taking the cue from the words, or is it working the other way around, or is it a bit of a...
No,
bit of both?
it's really symbiotic.
Right.
They influence each other. So originally, Sophia, I'm going to call her Fi. Fi originally started with the pitch because, I hadn't gone to Iceland at that point. And then I came back with all of these photographs, unedited, kind of just dumped them all on her desk. We kind of spent a couple of months going back and forth, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of like an Ouija board. Everybody's technically pushing it, but you don't know in what direction. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of emerged this. You start seeing threads, and then the words started evolving and then influencing picture edits. And so on my wall at home, I've got this huge I've got every picture, including crime scene photographs, all pinned against my wall, which is great when guests come around because they think I'm kind of Jeffrey Dahmer. But it's really it's a two-way conversation, and it's something which I've never really done before, being this kind of photographer in the landscape, kind of on my own, in my own thoughts, which can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad and lonely thing at times. And so working with Fi and Emily, it's been a really liberating experience.
You mentioned America and the prospect of forest preservation. Mm-hmm. It's quite interesting because unknowing to me, it was only last week when I was just brushing up on, meeting Jack next week, I'll have another quick gander at some of his images and the projects he's been involved in. I do actually subscribe to Another Escape.
Oh, really?
Yes. And I'd come across your images and was just viewing them for the images and not the photographer. I don't tend, so it'd be interesting to get your take on this. I find that these modern books coming out, Serial, Another Escape, and there's many, many others, fascinating because of the quality and the graft that goes into the printing. But I'd come across those photographs of yours in America without knowing it was you.
Oh, really?
Just skinned until last week. So how did that come about, working with those guys at Another Escape? Yes, to get those images published?
Well, I mean, the whole thing happened by chance, I guess. So actually making the work, originally I just finished my last day shooting for A Pink Flamingo. That's it, I don't want to take any more. Right. And I'd already visited this small town in the south of Oregon called Prospect. And I loved it because of its name. And it's kind of, no one lives there. Old lumber mill town. And it was, picturesque kind of Twin Peaks-esque town. So I went down there again with the idea of following the sheriff around this kind of town of, 80 people. How does he police that?
I bet they're all characters, though.
They're all amazing. But not in characters in a kind of caricature sense. No. They're all just amazingly interesting people. And he wasn't technically a sheriff. He was I'm not sure what the word is, like a marshal, kind of. Said that they were doing a controlled burn that day. So they invited me along. So just by chance, I ended up taking those pictures. And I've met Rachel and Jodie, who do Another Escape, a couple of months before that at Miniclick, which is something I do in Brighton. Mm-hmm. And I've made the body of work, and then I put it on my website and didn't think anything of it. I mean, the project's just called Prospect, and because I kind of had my flagship, A Pink Flamingo, which I was trying to push. And then I'd quit my job. I'd sold a print, so I had a bit of... Sorry, there's a train.
We're overlooking Cardiff train station.
I sold a print, so I had a bit of extra income, because I sold it through a gallery. So with that money, I flew to Sierra Leone. And it was when I landed, I got an email from Rachel saying, we want to use your pictures. And obviously I had nothing with me, so I had to phone my housemate while in the middle of nowhere in Sierra Leone and get him to send them the photo. So if you actually look really carefully at the pictures, he sent the wrong files, so they've all got dust over them. But luckily, because it's a forest fire, they all look like...
Adds to the atmosphere.
Adds to the atmosphere, yeah. But that's how it came about. And I think Rach and Jodie are quite possibly the most exciting independent publishers in the UK.
It's a great book, isn't it? Absolutely. Just the diversity of the stories as well, and the opportunity, I think, for other photographers to contribute work.
I often think there tends to be a trade-off between the written word and photography, but because they're their history is very much embedded within photography. Kind of, it works so well, and I've been a subscriber since day one, and they're just both lovely people, but also incredibly talented as well.
It was interesting. I mean, obviously, what made a lot of those photographs is, and you're waiting for it, is the light. Just it's the painterly quality, isn't it, of just what smoke can do with light in combination, I think, in particular those big vistas of, the height of those trees and, just sprinklings of colour with the guys with the helmets and the shovels and what have you. I mean, was that a one-day, that was a one-day shoot, wasn't it?
1 hour shoot.
Really?
Yeah. Mainly because, in order for the marshal to take me out there, he was part Japanese and part Native American, and I think every other Friday, one member of staff makes lunch for all the members of staff, and he wanted to make sushi. So in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Oregon, in this kind of like pine trees around everywhere, I'm making sushi in exchange for him taking me along to burn this forest. It's a bit nuts when I say it. And then he took me out, and I took all these photographs, and it was fine. And then it was kind of, I could have taken so many more photographs of burning stuff, but I think maybe I'm not a big fan of photographing the same thing more than once. And so for me, that was a real exercise in kind of trying to tell a narrative when it's just the same thing you're photographing. There's only so many times you can photograph, a fireman kind of sweating and with an axe in his hand.
Were you shooting? Was it film?
Yeah, I only shoot on film.
Only?
Well, for my professional work, I have a digital camera.
Right.
But for my personal work, it's only film. And it's not necessarily a visual thing. It's mainly because of the workflow. Is
that medium format?
That was, Prospect was. I normally shoot on 10x8, large format.
Ooh, look at you.
Fortunately, I didn't have to pay for my film because of I assist a photographer who bought a digital medium format camera, and he gave me 250 sheets of nearly expired film. So I've been using that since. But otherwise, I would have no way of being able to use it. And I also develop it at my old university, who are incredible in supporting their alumni. So that's kind of kept my costs down.
Right.
But I'm quite a big fan of the actual workflow. So using film or using digital, I think it's quite a pointless argument at this point. But when it comes to actually being able to hold something, that for me is, I'm much more of a tactile learner than I am anything else. So when it comes to picking something up and looking at it and putting it down, that kind of works a lot better with the way I see the world.
I mean, given the power of some of those images you came up with in Amazed to hear it's an hour. I should go back and read that Another Escape rather than just look at the pictures. But are you tempted, like Iceland, to go back to that and to perhaps explore that a bit more, either the place, the people, or that whole process of the burn?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's just I'd do this all the time if I could, fly around the country and fly around the world and make projects. But I think I'm not sure how much I'd be able to do. Funny enough, the first person that ever wrote about Prospect has recently just come back from Prospect because she was so interested in the town that when she was in Portland, Oregon, she spent 2 days driving down to Prospect just to check it out. And it's a really amazing little town. But in terms of revisiting, maybe one day, but not for the foreseeable future. I've got my hands tied. Because
there was details of your picture. Are you aware of Jane Ffoton's work with the burn? I've used the phrase the burn, but that I think she had a phrase which was regenerative destruction, which I found very interesting. And it's just to think of an old place, a small place like that, although it is land management, it's a very interesting kind of ancient way of managing woodlands.
I mean,
but some of the detail work, you could see it in yours as well, which is just the abstract, isn't it, of that smoke and the light. She's completely focused on in that book, or I think she's done a couple now books of that particular subject matter, which is just fascinating, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Painterly and very artistic.
I think with Prospect, the town, the thing that I found most interesting is the reason they were doing it was to get rid of all the undergrowth so that deers would come, which would then in turn attract hunters, which is their main source of income, is hunting tourism. So it's a real kind of destructive thing to make sure life flourishes, so then you can also then be destructive. Yeah. And it's this weird cycle, and it's that idea of, like, especially, it lives up to its name, the prospect of burning all of this. Is there is a chance that deers will come, which is there a chance that hunters will come. There's something quite circle of life, Lion King about all of that, but it's quite beautiful, I thought. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Miniclick, and we'll come to a little bit of your background, but that one in particular, how old are you?
25.
See, I'm amazed. You're doing so much at the moment.
You see my hairline? Look at
that. But Miniclick is interesting because you're doing it. You're no longer based in Wales, but you're down in Brighton now. I mean, sure. What was the spark for this gathering of photographers?
Well, I think Miniclick had started 2 years before I'd moved to Brighton, by a guy called Jim Stevenson, and it originated from Flickr, of all places, and it was people having these discussions on Flickr, and it was like, why don't we go to a cafe and we'll do this and we'll show some work. And that ended up being so successful that it then evolved into, how about we do this every month? How about we move from the cafe to a bar? And it's just evolved from then. And around about that time, when I was in my final year of university, I got featured in the BJP as one of those kind of graduate profile things. And Jim had seen it with the person who worked on Miniclick with him then, Lou Miller. And they thought, oh, well, let's have a graduate talk, so a panel discussion with lots of different people from that one issue. So they gave me a call, and this is just the way sometimes the world works. The day after I graduated from university, I woke up in my parents' house in Canton, and I just decided that I'd spent enough time in Wales. I'm going to catch a bus to Brighton, because I went there during the Martin Parr's photo biennial. And I'm just going to see if I can get a job and a place to live there. And I found a job and a place to live the same day. And it was when I was on the bus there that I got the phone call from Jim asking if I'd do a Miniclick the next month. So we met up, and I think through a mutual love of Northern Soul and beer, we quickly hit it off. And I guess I just made myself a bit of a nuisance. I, at the time, had a car, so I'd be driving all of the stuff to set up, and then after a while, Jim asked me if I'd want to join the team. And Miniclick, it isn't about any one person. It's really about encouraging the community to converse and to kind of just engage with photography on a different level. So we always say we never talk about kit. The fact you got me to talk about film earlier was...
And we very rarely do, but I was interested because you talked about dust on the images, that was why.
So we always say to anyone we invite to speak, you're not allowed to talk about kit. These are talks that are just about ideas. And so a lot of people that come to the Miniclick talks in Brighton aren't photographers, they're designers, they're writers, or just you don't have to have any kind of history in the creative media. Anyone can really enjoy them.
Brighton has that buzz, though, doesn't it? I mean, it's both on the tech scene as well, the creative tech scene, as well as, I think, the artistic and photography type community. It is quite a buzz down there.
I think so. There's a lot of photographers that live there. Because, me being naive, I just assumed that Brighton was always as busy as it was when I was down for the biennial. So when I actually got there, I was quite disappointed that there was... What do you mean there's only one thing a month for Miniclick? But it's actually... I think that another reason I like it so much is I grew up in Cardiff, and so I could walk down a street, and you end up after a while bumping into someone you know, and then you'd go for coffee. So Cardiff isn't as big as most people like to think it is, and so there is an element of community there. And Brighton Brighton and Hove is on a similar scale, so you can walk down a street and you can bump into someone you know, and then that's where these kind of, I don't know, whether these things pop up. It's, I'm working on this. Oh, fantastic! I've got this. Maybe this can help.
Bit of serendipity kicking in.
Yeah, and it's all about kind of riding the wave of serendipity and kind of just going with the flow. And Brighton does have, like most kind of left-leaning places, full of creatives, this kind of smugness about it. But it's, I personally, I don't think I could live anywhere else in the UK, just because I'm so settled there, and I feel part of a a community that's much bigger than one person and much bigger than just MiniClick. It's just this creative, I don't know, conglomerate that we're making on the south coast.
And just describe the format then. So I've never been to one, and I hope to make one in the future. But I appear, we go into a venue. So
we're at a place called the Old Market, which is this theatre, and they've very kindly given us their bar. And what would happen is you'll turn up, there'll be lots of seats, you go sit down, you'll probably end up sitting next to someone you don't know. Everybody chats because everybody is quite laid back about it. You have a drink, the speaker comes on, they typically speak for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then there's a 15-minute break so people can...
With images, slides?
Yeah, with slides behind them. And then they'll have their 15-minute break so people can go to the bathroom or have a cigarette, and then they come back, and then there's a Q&A. Right. But the best part about MiniClick, I think, is that the conversations always continue well on into the night. So we go to a bar around the corner, and that's when the real questions come out. That's when it's like, you know, the questions you wouldn't ask in front of a group of people about, oh, what was it like doing this, or how did you get them to do this? And I think that's the nice thing, is it kind of, and I think it's why so many, well-established photographers sing MiniClick's praises, is because it really does drop the pretense of photography. It's there's no us and them kind of thing. It's just one person telling a group of people their view of storytelling or their ideas. And
I bet beer and whiskey helps as well.
Oh, beer and whiskey always helps. But so that's one of the formats, and another one we do panel discussions. We last year did exhibitions. We made our own publications. We were up in Derby, Liverpool this year. And another thing, no one makes any money out of it. That's the thing which I'm not sure a lot of people know, is a lot of it comes out of our own bank accounts. So whenever we do charge for something, the rest of any kind of foam on top goes straight to the Tim Hetherington Foundation.
Right.
So it's kind of, as long as it pays for itself, because we pay people's travels and we'll book workshops and stuff like that. But anything that we make goes straight to the Tim Hetherington Foundation, which is a great charity.
Right. Yeah. Do you think so this coming together of photographers, a community, do you think that, we'll go back now to your photographic education, if we may. Do you think that's what people miss when they do graduate, is that banter, that discussion, that criticism, healthy or otherwise, of other people's work? You studied at Newport?
Newport, yeah.
And it was the documentary course that you did. That was 3 years, wasn't it? How did you find that?
It was, I speak about this quite a lot. I did photography for 6 months before I joined the course.
Right.
Completely new to it, didn't know anything. And I sat opposite Clive Landon, who was one of the tutors at the time. He's retired now. I'd failed all my A-levels, so I had no points, no UCAS points. And I think Clive saw a potential sparkle in my eye, because he leaned forward and said, if you fuck up once, you're out. And that was it. And I've kind of lived with that
You
since.
paid attention.
Oh God, yeah. And I didn't really pay attention in high school, so it was a bit strange being spoken to like an adult, and kind of my opinions were listened to. And I think if I was to accredit anyone to where I am today, it would be Paul, Ken and Clive from Newport. A lot of people have different experiences with education, and a lot of people kind of hide the fact that they've done photography education, because for some people it's a bit of a weird thing to study. But without a shadow of a doubt, it was the best thing I've ever done. Is
what did you get out of it then? Was it on the academic, or was it the actual just practical?
It was everything. Like I said, I didn't even know how to really use a camera when I started. Right. I remember someone making a comment because I didn't know who Martin Parr was when we went to an exhibition. And it was like any education. It's an institution, and you will get in what you put out. Typically, I find the people that slag off institutions are the people that didn't put a lot in, or the people that didn't go. I think you can get an equal education if you don't go to university and you just, you study it yourself. Like, there's no written rule, and I think people need to stop thinking that if you do this, then this will happen. You do this, and this will happen. Like, it's all natural. It all kind of If you're passionate about something, you'll find a way of learning about it one way or another. I just so happened to, my journey, I went through university.
So you did the course?
Did the course.
And then what happened?
Graduated, moved to Brighton next day. And I had an office job for 2 years, which a lot of people didn't know.
Photography related?
Kind of. I don't really want to say the company's name. But I used to sell used cameras.
Right.
For 2 years, and what I'd do is I'd work for 11 months, and then on the 12th month I would take all of my holiday, my 28 days, and then I'd go to America, and I'd spend everything I saved in those 11 months on petrol and car hire and a flight. And that's really how I subsidised A Pink Flamingo. And it's one of the things I learned. Gawain, again, who's always seemed to be behind me in all of the decisions I've made in my life, had said to me just before I graduated that it's really important not to leave university with a finished project. Because I started it when I was in uni, because I had an academic enhancement bursary. I did some other kind of I had loose morals when it came to where I sourced my money when I was at the end of university, which I can't say for legal reasons. But he said, don't finish university with a finished project. And it was the best advice I had, because I think if I would have put a full stop at the end of this project, then it would have been awful. I mean, some people probably think it is awful, but it's a lot better than it would have been. And so then I continued doing that for 2 years, and then I finished the body of work, and what happened? Oh, then I sold a print through this gallery. And I thought, oh, well, if there was ever a time for me to go freelance, it's now, kind of springboard off this exhibition I had a couple of years ago. And so I did that, and I went to Sierra Leone, and then made a body of work out there. Ebola broke out, so I couldn't show the work, or I didn't want to show the work. Another escape happened, and then I've been jobbing, as they say, in between, which a lot of photographers don't like to admit they do, but they do. Kind of.
I think it's a necessity. Really,
well, I think,
and it's healthy, I think, as well.
You kind of, and for some reason, people don't like to admit they do it, because I think they like to appear that that's the one thing they do. But one thing I've learned, at least, and it's taken me a while, is you really need to have an octopus career. You need to, know how to do this, and a lot of my income does come from photography, but it comes from other sources as well. Assisting is another great way of getting money, and also a shed load of film when they buy new cameras. But it's one thing I learned when I graduated, because it was the one thing I noticed that no one would talk about, is where they get the money, because people get really protective of these things, and I almost felt so one thing I would say about university is, and it's not their fault, because I think when you become part of an institution and you reach that level where you can teach professional practice, your opinions of professional practice are already irrelevant, because the landscape of photography, or the landscape of the creative arts, has moved so much since you got into that institution.
Unless I think you are a visiting, ongoing practitioner.
Yeah.
If that is your real graft through the week as a professional photographer, then you can. I think you have the right then to preach about it.
Yeah, and I think also there is this level of. I've always said that photographers present their careers the same way they present their photographs. Like, you won't see the shit stuff they do, because they only want to show the best of the best. And I wish I understood that a bit more when I first left, because it wasn't the office that I worked in, it wasn't their fault, that it was a job that I didn't want to do. We didn't end up getting on very well. But it was something which I kind of had this expectation, and it happens to everybody. And I think when you only see someone's highlight reel, you can become really disillusioned, and then that's when people start, stopping doing photography, which is a really bad thing you shouldn't do. And they because you'll always question yourself, question what you're doing, and compare it to them. But everybody has gone through the same thing, but not many people are willing to talk about it, I find.
So the unfinished university project, it's been a long time coming.
Yes.
Then. A Pink Flamingo. I mean, there's a couple of aspects I'd like to talk to you about that. There's the work itself, and the people you came across, and those environments, I think, and that trail that you followed. But you've also pursued now your first self-publishing, quite a tidy self-publishing project as well. But just describe the project then, and you touched on it very briefly earlier,
Sure.
but why the interest in that particular subject matter?
I think, in that time of my life, it was very much a transition period. I was just about to finish uni, there was a bit of uncertainty, and I'd been aware of the Oregon Trail since I was very little, because there used to be this educational video game called the Oregon Trail, right, which you kind of had to get all of your family to the other side to Oregon without them dying, but it was like you learned about the places and the history of the places along the way. And so I saw this journey from Missouri to Oregon as almost a metaphor for grass is greener on the other side. And it's this trip that the fur traders took, it was a real gamble, because they traveled to Oregon. A lot of people died along the way. When they got there, they could draw a line in the sand, put a flag down, and that's their home. Mm. So the payoff was huge, but the risk was kind of terrifying. Mm-hmm. And so during this kind of depression that was going on, or still going on, and the housing market problem, I just thought, what a kind of interesting parallel between what happened then and what's happening now. And the title, A Pink Flamingo, kind of came to me. It sounds a bit too cliche, but there is some thought behind it. So when Americans very famously landed on the moon, the first thing they did was put a flag down, the American flag. And after the Great Depression, these pink flamingos, created by Donald Featherstone, started emerging, and they were kind of this pop culture icon, and it was a way for people to exoticize their front gardens. And I kind of saw it as the housing equivalent of an American flag. Mm. Kind of, you get to Oregon, and instead of an American flag, you put a pink flamingo. And so if you look through the body of work, it's really about, there's lots of photos of model homes, disused timber yards, kind of people that live in motels, all of this kind of very transient, almost as if they're waiting for things to get better. So that's what the project's about.
Mm. And the book?
The book has been a very long time. It's been a year in design, and then after this Magnum thing, it was the cash injection I needed to push it over to get it published.
Because you're not doing this half-arsed, are you? You've done this book properly in terms of design and publishing and printing.
I've gone all on black on this one. It's been a very long process just to get the finances together. Even to the point that, so I had 100 pre-orders, and with the pre-orders comes a scratch card, and if you scratch and you get 3 pink flamingos in a row, you get a signed in edition print, a 50 by 40 inch, which is
cool,
pretty big. And so there's lots of different ways I use the fundraising, but one thing I'm quite against is Kickstarter and these crowdfunding sources, because it just becomes, come on, you're my mate, give me £10 and I'll tweet about you. And I think there's smarter ways. Like if you really wanted to publish a book, you'd just eat rice for a month.
Although you do have to deliver on those crowdfunding campaigns, don't you?
You do, yeah.
There is an impetus too.
But the migraine, I think, that you get looking at someone trying to crowdfund, and it's just, I'm just talking mainly online, and it's just every other tweet or Facebook status is give me money, give me money, give me money, and there are other ways of doing it, and I think I'm not sure if it's damaging or not relying on the art world, or relying on your other photographers that are all struggling to subsidise your book, when you can find, I didn't publish this book. The reason I didn't do it half-assed is because I didn't rush it, and I didn't publish it till I had the finance to do it, and very fortunately, thanks to Idea Step and Magnum, I did.
So just describe some of the route, the publishers you're going with, the printers, where they're based, and how you're doing it.
So it's designed by Stanley James Press, this lovely lady called Emily, who's also working with me now for Sugar Paper Theories. Right. And we started a year ago, and the only way I was able to subsidise paying her for the design was I did it monthly in instalments, kind of like a phone contract, which is a great way of designing a book, because you can kind of revisit it once a month. And then for the actual printing of it, we've gone with EBS in Verona in Italy, which is a favourite of Stuart Smith and Gost books, which was a bit of an experience. amazing experience, but it was great. And then in terms of distribution, I'm handling all of that myself. Photo Gallery are going to end up having quite a few during the Diffusion month, and I think they're going to be stocking it now in their gallery. Right. But the book launch is on the 3rd of October, as well as my exhibition opening, which we're currently stood in the space of. And I'm just trying to think. You can still order them now. It's on, if you just go to jacklatham.com/bookshop, look at that plug.
But it is a limited edition, is that right?
It's 750. Right. It's a run of 750. The first 100, like I said, come with these scratch cards, which there is, the reference to the scratch card is, because I didn't have a lot of money when I was making the body of work, what I'd do as a way of saving, it sounds really, this is the mind of a nutter, but I'd buy a scratch card every day, I'd scratch it off, a $1 scratch card. If I won, regardless of what amount, I'd stay in a motel that night. If I didn't, I'd stay in the car. And it was just a way of, because all of my work is about finding people and, leaving things up to chance. I wanted to leave everything up to chance.
How did that process pan out then? Did you end up on top?
A lot of nights in the car. I did win quite a few times, but it worked out being, longest was 4 nighs in the car, which was fine. But it became really difficult to photograph people because no one wanted to stand next to me because I stunk. But so I ended up, but there was also, I made a body of work while I was doing that called Scratch Card Motel, which was about the scratch cards and my accommodation that night, and then the motel, or the motel I'd stay in. So I've not really shared that work before, and I don't think I will, but it was kind of an experiment, and it was just another process of kind of putting yourself in a situation which you wouldn't normally put yourself in. And sometimes I find that's where the magic happens. That's where the hidden X factor is. You might discover something you didn't, or you might be in a state of mind you wouldn't normally be because you had an awful night's sleep and you're just thinking a bit silly, and then you'll end up just seeing something or connecting dots. And so that was very much, that's what I mean, it was part of the process. It was just the way I made the work, yeah.
So you mentioned briefly earlier, you're back here in Cardiff now for setting up for the Diffusion Festival, which A Fine Beginning, which you're also at the collective with Gawain, who we mentioned a couple of times, your spiritual backer, Abby Trailer-Smith, and James Jenkins. How did that come about? Because that was the year after, I think, you graduated.
Yeah,
you ended up in a
I
collective.
met James. I got rejected from the Taylor Wessing, like I think 99,
as most people do.
And then I entered into Portrait Salon, and through MiniClick, we did a Petracuccia, which is 20 slides, 20 seconds, for Portrait Salon of some of the people that they presented in their newspaper. And so I got chatting to James through that, found out he was Welsh, had a couple of beers. Again, this is where the best kind of connections happen. It's next to a bartender. And I think about a couple of months later, I got a phone call from him asking if I was in London anytime soon and we should have a chat. And we met up, and then we had a chat, and then it kind of happened in this one pub. From there, it kind of just evolved into what it is now. I think James is much more a fan of calling it a collective. I think, for me anyway, it's much more of a platform for Welsh photographers, as it is mainly. I'd like to say that I do my fair share for a firm. I'm far lagging behind in terms of, I need to pick up the pace in terms of helping out a bit more. But for me, it's really nice and the same with Ffoton, just another institution in Wales supporting Welsh art made in Wales, but not necessarily just by Welsh artists. And I think that's a crucial thing I think that's what Wales needs.
And I think it's important that they're self-run as well. And I think what's also great, and this is I think why MiniClick has flourished so much, is we don't have any sponsors. So you don't really have to answer to anyone, or you don't, need to do this or this just to, appease your sponsors, and you keep it kind of by the people for the people. But A Fine Beginning, it has gone strength to strength, and I think largely due to Gawain, Abby, and James. I'd like to say I've been so distant with everything else that's been going on. I feel I've got this
guilt in me that I haven't been pulling my weight. But James in particular has just spearheaded this whole thing.
But I think it's good, we were talking off mic a little bit earlier, I think it's good to be away from these things and come back, isn't it? Because you're probably, the experiences, the projects, the things you're doing on your own are probably formulating some interesting, bubbling ideas to bring back into Wales.
Yeah,
a fine beginning.
I think so. And we were also saying, I mean, born and bred here, I'm incredibly passionate about what happens within Wales, and it's nice to see, you know, more and more things happening like Ffoton and you know, like A Fine Beginning, and I hope it gets better and better. But I just hope that the institutions start talking to each other a bit more, as opposed to, you know, being individual entities. Because I think that's one of the things. We work so well because we work with Look Festival and we work with Formats and we work with Photo Forum, who is a London kind of. They do the same thing we do, but they're in London, and we're not in competition or anything like that. But we encourage and we share notes, and we'll promote their events, they promote ours. And I think, I'm not sure the reason why, but I often find that with certain institutions, that it becomes more about that institution's brand as opposed to what it is they're trying to promote. And it should always start and end with photography culture. Because
I was having this very conversation. There was no beer or Rioja involved.
There's not now, sadly.
No, I'll need to sort that out next time. Around the value of certain organisations to support photography, but as with most things, when it comes to funding, they seem to forget that it's the photographers they're meant to be supporting and the work. So it's one thing to have these platforms to support it, but the work needs to be there in the first place, and the talent needs to be creating that work, I think, in a productive and kind of creative way for the others then to do their part to promote it. And it's a delicate kind of balance. It's a bit of an ecosystem.
Well, Miniclick, we don't have any funding. And it's amazing.
Nor Ffoton.
And it's amazing what you do when you actually, you know, a lot of, I mean, the ACE funding in England going down is a terrible thing, but it's forcing people to think outside the box, which in a silver lining, it's making things a bit more grassroots, it's making things a bit more exciting. Yeah. But it is amazing what you can do with such a little budget, or not having, you know, somewhere else, someone to answer to. I don't think I'd be able to make a fine beginning if I had someone else's funding, because they'd want deadlines, they'd want it'd be curated in a certain way. But it's just about, for me, the thing, and the reason I think that I've kind of got to where I am today is because I'm able to have an open dialogue about photography, not about my work, just about photography so easily within Brighton. And I really want that. I want it to be more in Wales in particular, because I'm so passionate, and I think what everyone is doing in Wales in terms of the institutions is so great, but it'd be great to kind of just make it this, because I often now hear when I go back to Newport and I talk to students there, I want to move to Brighton, or I want to move to London. It's just the two places. I'm a hypocrite because I live in Brighton, but I want to hear people in London or Brighton going, I really want to move to Cardiff because, or I want to move to Wales because, you know, there's just such a cultural buzz there. Cardiff, there is such an amazing art scene in Cardiff, but it's just trying to penetrate the inner Cardiff bubble. Yeah. So it kind of bleeds out into England, Scotland and Ireland. That's the tricky thing.
But I think one of the things that does kind of gel, bring these people in is the opportunity to see the work, not online but physically. Now, with A Fine Beginning, it's not just you four, though, is it, when it comes to shows? Because you have another, I think it's the second.
This is the second
Made in Wales show coming up.
So we have a blog which James kind of maintains, and we try to get as many kind of Welsh-based photographers or photographers making work within Wales on it as possible. And we try to have an exhibition every year showing kind of almost like a highlight reel of that show. Yeah. So our second one, which is called Made in Wales 2, is on September the 9th to the 19th. It's at Cardiff Made Private View, which is Thursday the 10th of September at 6:30. And
that's
then
in Roath, isn't it?
Yes, that's in Roath. And then on November the 9th, it'll be in London, and the private view then will be the 12th of November. But if you want more information, check out afinebeginning.com. It is also going to Colwyn Bay, Colwyn, March 1st to April 31st next year.
Right.
So you'll be able to, hopefully, either Cardiff, London, or North Wales, you'll be able to hopefully catch it. Okay. But if you want any more information, go to afinebeginning.com.
And how did you pull all those? There's quite a mix of photographers there, isn't there?
Yeah, we get submissions quite a lot.
Of course, for the blog, yeah.
But also, I mean, it's amazing, and I think this goes again to the idea of community, the power of word of mouth. The amount of times people have gone, oh my God, have you checked, this person's work? I think Francesca Jones is one of those people that someone told me about her work, and I spent, the next 30 minutes trying to dissect all of her portrait. It's like, wow, that's amazing light, and I think that's the kind of thing that comes with having conversations with fellow practitioners or people that are just passionate about photography. Is you discover new work, and it's not as self-indulgent as just being on your own in front of a computer. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken to Francesca, and it's interesting. You were talking earlier about assisting, and I think technically she's very good because she's done a lot of commercial studio photography assisting. So that thing about light and if it isn't there, what she needs to put in, she's very, very good at. But yeah, I think that's one of the up and coming talents.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll put my money on Francesca, but I mean, everybody in the show is fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's such a broad variety of work as well that there should be something for everybody. But they're always great fun. I mean, the last one was a big hit, and there was booze as well. Booze, and I sound like an alcoholic. There was booze and food, but it's just a great way to meet other people, to making work in Wales, and hopefully through that conversations and dialogue, things can evolve into something bigger. Fingers crossed.
You're here in Cardiff now, getting ready for your exhibition, part of Diffusion. Do you want to explain just where we are and what you're going to be doing?
We're in Stadium Plaza, which it's the top floor, the 5th floor, where the View Cinema is, just opposite the station. We're overlooking Cardiff, pretty much. And we're in a room
plasterboard room.
A plasterboard room of disrepair. We've had to make a table.
But a big space.
Yeah, it's a lot of wall to fill. A lot more than...
Daunted?
Slightly. After this now, I'm going back to print the show, so that's gonna be a couple of sleepless nights I have now. But it's exciting, and it's, I think, another reason for people to come and visit Wales and check out what's going on.
And what work are you showing?
A Pink Flamingo.
Great.
Just A Pink Flamingo.
So people will get to see the book.
See the book
Big.
and see the prints. So we're getting, I think, a large scale prints as well. So. Hopefully it'll be busy.
And when does the show open?
The festival opens on the 1st, but
October.
1st of October. But I think they're doing it in chunks. So I think the 1st is down the bay, the 2nd is Penarth Turner House, and then the 3rd is what's going on in the city centre, which is the Saturday.
Right.
And there's going to be you can do a walking tour, or you can just visit. And I think the book launch is happening just next door at Stut. I think I'm saying that right. Next to Shaw's, just in between Abacus and here.
Ah, right, yeah.
And then, but the exhibition, and there'll be some books here to buy too. So I hope it goes well.
Great.
I'll be a lot bolder when next time you see me, probably. Or more drunk.
A bit more tipsy, I was going to say.
More drunk.
Yeah. Gran, thanks very much, Jack.
Thank you.